Latency issues.
How should it be?
Latency issues? Oh,
Now it's live. uh, how should it be sown? How should it dawn? Let it be this way. Think about it. This water should be removed, emptied out for the formation of the earth's own plate and platform. Then comes the sowing, the dawning of the sky earth, and then the earth arose because of them. It was simply their word that brought it forth. For the forming of the earth, said earth, it arose suddenly, just like a cloud, like a mist, now forming, unfolding. Then the mountains were separated from the water. All at once the great mountains came forth. By their genius alone, by their cutting edge alone, they carried out the conception of mountain plain, whose face grew instant groves of cypress and pine.
The program you are about to hear is fiction, science fiction. We make no guarantees, however, how long it will remain fiction, fiction, fiction.
Regenerating salutations, Cognodocs. Welcome to Exofathom. I'm Mike, and we had some technical issues there. How's it going? How's this Friday flowing?
Wonderful. I mean, I knew as soon as I spoke that it was going to hit the live broadcast. So for the people who don't know, we were waiting. The wheel was spinning for it to go live, and it was taking about like 30 seconds, which is not normal. And as soon as I said, "Oh, there's latency issues," that's when we went live.
and this is all prefaced by a warning that one of our mics might drop during today's presentation. So thinking that is what happened, I started to fill dead airspace. So for you guys, we're trying really hard. And sometimes when you try really hard, you fuck things up worse. So Murphy's Law, is that it? Mercury retrograde? Hey! That was our last episode, right? So bringing it all connecting.
Perfect. Great callback.
Yeah.
But cool. Yeah, no, that was fun. I haven't done a cold open in like a month and a half anyway, so it's all good.
Nice.
Well, aside from us screwing it up, you did great.
Oh, thanks. I feel like I screwed it up too, but there's like somewhere in the middle there, like the tone shifted, and I think I could have like kept it at that tone from the beginning going. Anyways, so this was supposed to be Monday's episode, but on Sunday I went to a campfire and just decided to sit downwind of the campfire and just breathed in all this smoke. And I ended up dealing with smoke inhalation issues for like a good 2 days. On the third day, I was finally back, but those 2 days are rough. And if it wasn't for AR, who suggested some steam therapy, this episode may have never happened.
The power of the steam, man. A good eucalyptus steam will set any ailment right, including coat. Nope, just kidding. That was a bad joke. No, steam's great for a lot of stuff, though.
Well, now that we got the salutations and intros out of the way, I guess. How much do you know about like Mayan religion stuff? How much do you know about the Mayans in general?
Honestly, not very much. Aside from perhaps precursory world history classes in high school, I can't say that I do know a lot. I'm actually excited to learn something.
Sweet, yeah. Yeah, I didn't pick up much from like I guess elementary, middle school growing up, but luckily that Native American studies allowed me to kind of dive into it more. And it gets pretty fascinating. It gets very strange, like far less peaceful than you would imagine. Oh.
Weren't the Mayans that like other awful Mel Gibson movie? Was it Mel Gibson? You know, like they're in the forest and it's like older back in the day. There's like murders, and then there's like a father trying to protect his lady.
Apocalypse.
Yes. Wasn't that based on the Mayan, or was that someone else?
I think it was either the Mayans or the Aztecs. I bet I can't be 100% sure.
Yeah.
Um, I remember that they tried to keep like all like the languages authentic and stuff like that, but for the life of me, it's been so long since I've seen that movie. I have no clue.
I know it has been a minute. And similarly, like I feel like I know more about the Mayans, but I think my brain does this thing, and tell me if this happens to you too, where you study something and for a hot minute, you know everything about it. You're super like you got it memorized, and maybe for months you're good. But then like a year later, it's just totally gone, not to be, recollected.
Oh well, I'm always like, I mean, like I have a memory of a goldfish sometimes, and only I can really only remember things if they're like elicited or brought up. But as far as recalling things off the top of my head, then no, I am terrible at that. I'll
Yeah, I can't recall.
I had this whole episode prepped like on Monday,
Mhm.
and I'm pretty sure half the knowledge fell out of my brain. Just maybe it might have been from like the smoke inhalation or something, but there's like a nice structure to it and flow and everything. Yeah, I
I
had to
dig
switch
it.
microphones. So I had life. So now I'm using
You
the
sound a little nasally.
all right. I can hear it.
Yeah, I can hear it now.
I can hear
Oh,
it
poor thing. Your poor sinus.
Well, this is how I
Craziness.
really sound.
You'll have been fooled. But no, it's
No.
funny because just to wrap that up, yeah, I might not be able to recall it, but if I hear something, it'll trigger like the memory. I think there's a name for that. I don't know what it is, but I don't know. There's like two types of people, or there's like different types of memory recall. So I don't know. We could get into that some other day. Memory is cool.
For sure. So I guess where we can start is some like the underpinnings of like Mayan religion comes down to like two major things: reciprocity and rites of passage and like ritual type things. Like their
Hmm.
whole culture, from like the commoner all the way up, had to do with these two fundamental things. Even uh, their notion of like death, like you died multiple times in your life, and you would have to go through these trials in the underworld, much like the belly of the beast type stuff. And when you came out self transformed, and it was based off of like they had a deep relationship with nature and agriculture. So like farming, like you would sow seeds into the ground, like the sun would set and go underneath the earth and then come back up again. But the day was transformed and time was transformed.
Hmm. I really love that. Um, I don't know, as you were speaking about it, I just thought about how beautiful it would be to live in a society where you're constantly tending to the soul. It kind of sounds like that's part of it. You're acknowledging where you came from and then also
Yes.
this journey.
Well, that's
It's
where they
cool.
ended up getting their calendar from. Like they had to keep their long count calendar. They had to keep track of their ancestors. Like it was very sacred to them to know all of their ancestors. So they started to come up with notions that we called years and things like that. But their years were a bit different. They were clocking in at like 360 days, and they had 20 months. Yeah, and they had their last month was only 5 days long, and it was like the underworld type month.
That's cool. Yeah, I want to schedule something for the third of the underworld month. Guy, that's going to be tricky. That's a difficult month for us. Just thinking about like let's say the Mayan civilization was still around today and operating that way. Like imagine you had to like ship something to somebody that lived there and you promised 1 day delivery, but they're like, "Dude, people don't deliver on this day." And you're like, "What do I do?" Like
That-
logistics.
yeah, no, I think it like took place between like Christmas and New Year. Or it seemed like would be around the time that we would map it to, or that we could have mapped it to.
Mm.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so I know for
Imagine having
me,
to pay. I hope the rent was prorated during that month. They don't have to pay 30-day prices for a 5-day month.
well,
Dude, that would suck.
I mean, February rent is coming up next only 28 days, right?
That's
That
true.
gets kind of rough.
You know
Should be
what? You're
prorated.
right. Let's talk to our landlords about this. But then again, it's like, yeah, are you supposed to do a month's worth of work in that 5 days? You know, like when you're trying to go on vacation and you never really get the time off, you just work more efficiently the week before and the week after. Like,
Well, that's ideally, right? Right. Or
yeah.
some people just, relax for a bit for that time. Like, vacation's coming up. I'm just chilling. Uh, but the interesting is they ended up paying a lot of stuff in blood. So imagine every time you got a promotion or every time you you got married, if you got married more than once, I guess a new partner, you can say. Every time you went through some sort of transformation in life, you let out a little bit of blood. Like
Wait.
that seems far fetched to us, doesn't it?
So wait. So it's almost like blood cleansing. Like if you do something good, you release a little bit of blood. To where? Like how? Do you know how?
Well, it depended. Like it was all ritualized, right? And your, uh, like I guess it depended too on your status because I only read about the like the most royal bloodletting, so they would do it to try to get in communication with their gods. That of course helped them for their better like a winning a war, uh, better farming from the I guess visions if you were a king. So like Mayan kings would do stuff like penile bloodletting in order to imitate women's menstrual cycles and childbirth because their idea was that they were trying to come into a totality where they were both the protector and nurturer of the whole culture, the whole civilization, or their town or city state would probably be the best way to describe it, which is crazy to me. And then female bloodletting, royal bloodletting, also happened in a very ritualistic fashion, usually at night, but it's kind of unclear what it was for. To what it seems like it was doing was trying to rip open the membrane between the the gods and the people, because all of the royal people, their job was to take this really complex ecological system and align it with their gods. That's why you also see their architecture design or set out in ways that aligned with the stars, that aligned with their calendar, because it was supposed to put them in alignment with their gods. And then if you want to jump down this weird rabbit hole of sorts, uh, there was early archaeological theories that they were tied to the people of Atlantis and like the tribes of Israel and all of that I guess a little bit of the woo, but I do like the idea that they're like lost Atlanteans.
Mm. Yeah, I like that too. I think there's something kind of interesting about pyramid building civilizations. Seems as though that they kind of I mean, it's it's crazy that we were building these structures without any communication with each other in very similar fashions. And so, yeah, I could see where it'd be like, oh, well, maybe these are scattered remnants of Atlanteans that went across the world and kind of taught the people their sciences and built civilizations, all over the place.
Yeah, no, I could definitely see that. And like there's sort of stuff that ties it to that as well. Like they had a notion of a cosmic tree, and this
Mm.
cosmic tree was it's found in it's found in Chinese, like ancient Chinese culture, found in a bunch of Native American culture, of course Yggdrasil with the Nordic culture. um, it seems to be like this god tree thing seems something that rooted humanity very early on in a tribal faith.
Mm.
And as this cosmic tree existed, um, things like uh, dragons were like fruits of the tree. Like different symbols and different ideas and different technologies are all fruits, and they fell.
Mm.
and then would grow as new plants, again hooking into their heavy agricultural um, ideas, faith.
Yeah, and I think it kind of is it's a perfect little representation of probably their geography as well, right? Because a lot of their home would have been rainforest. And I know in rainforest, and I'm not exactly sure if this is in South America or Central America, but you'll get things like super trees, where it's like one tree system kind of overtakes all the others, and then it roots out and creates a whole bunch of different tree systems, but they all go to that one sort of super tree. So I could see where it's like you're a civilization in the middle of the rainforest and you come across one of these giant trees. How you can see that like that has to be some sort of connection to the spirit world.
Yeah.
Well, and to add to that, there are some trees that will sort of like move over time. Have you heard about these? Like they can move considerable distances towards water or like towards connecting trees and things like that. You can't obviously see them walking, but they're moving.
Interesting. No,
Mhm.
actually, I didn't know that. Like, and geographically, we're looking at like southern Mexico and like Guatemala, and they're kind of stretching that area, and they end up interacting with the Aztecs a bit, and end up having like a little bit of trade through like this dragon cult, this Mayan dragon cult, where like they're actually able to have a like break a language barrier, which seems like really cool. Because usually
Hmm.
Aztecs were very imperialistic, right? They're kicking down doors and taking over places, and the sun never sets on the Aztec Empire or something like that. Like they were that type.
Mhm.
But the trade with the Mayans seems to be something important, which is kind of neat. And so, like the Mayan king himself was this sort of, I guess, moving tree. It was supposed to be like the living axis mundi, and had actually like through these like had a set of ritualistic dances and clothes that were sacred and significant. And I kind of like the idea as someone who gets uh, real nervous about their dancing ability. I like the fact that their dancing was sacred.
Yeah, no, I think gosh, that's so fascinating to think about. I'm loving this episode.
I mean, so what do you think about just that notion of like bleeding for a vision, this cosmic tree that seems to connect a bunch of just other civilizations together
Hmm.
and dragons?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like there has to be some sort of driving force behind a lot of that. Kind of like what Nick said, living in the forest and being so close to nature, that will influence you. And without distraction, you do notice things like trees walking, which they're walking palm trees in South America, um, or Latin America. It's called the Socratia exorcisa. I'm not good at Latin, but you notice these things. You're around it more, and so I think you can start to witness the living, breathing parts of nature somehow. I also wonder to what extent certain like medicinal plants were used to seemingly slow down time, because I'm thinking of specifically those nature shows where you have the forest floor, and they have like stop motion cameras set up, so you see 30 days, and you can see how much it's like rising and falling and shifting and moving. It looks super crazy. And so then you just think about folks who might use hallucinogenic plant life, and you can kind of infer observational, tendencies that way, maybe. Um, and then from the blood perspective, acupuncture is a lot about moving the chi, but it also moves the blood. And I feel like our science around blood types, blood diseases, it's still very novice in the way that I feel like we're going to end up discovering something that we actually knew a long time ago. We're just putting names to it and observing it with our tools today.
Part of me wonders if there were any sacred plants to the Mayan culture that may have produced a red sap, um, and that may be reinforcing their belief that they're all a part of this sort of like tree network, this world tree. Um, because I could see where, like maybe in felling trees to create their, whatever, could have come across a tree that perhaps produced like a red blood like sap, which there are many. Um, and maybe they found some sort of reverence in that too. Then you also have the idea that, serpents live in trees. And so that can be
Hmm.
a pretty easy parallel to the sort of dragon mythology.
Yeah, and I think that when you see such like like nature, when you're in nature, like if you go to the ancient forests of like near Alaska or even in South America, you go to like the rainforests, there's this, like if you've ever been in a rainforest, there's this awe that comes from it because it's so old, it takes on a life of its own. So it's just, yeah, it's just cool to see civilizations that start there and then everything kind of builds up.
Yeah, no, those. I do like. I do kind of like the idea of like that red sap reinforcing and the different components, kind of building up a single civilization, and but like those parallels to other civilizations around the world. Though I wonder if there's like a latitude longitude sort of thing,
Hmm.
and like my brain's a little scattered. Like I'm trying to think of all of the parallel civilizations, so I might seem like a little all over the place here, and
Hmm. Yeah.
but that's also too like a part of it where you, because if you think of like the cosmic tree as it grows, it has these branches, so these branches are going to reach out very far, and if ideas and mythologies fall for them, you're going to have to be able to reach pretty far.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's something about these megalithic societies that sort of have a magic to them that we can look back at and kind of marvel at and wonder, and it's, like even as recent as, a couple hundred years ago, um, and even as far as back as 6,000 years ago or 5,000 years ago when the, pyramids were built. Like that's that's something that's pretty incredible, and I think there's definitely some sort of connecting thread between all of those societies, whether it's in Asia or in Africa or Latin America. Yeah, there's definitely something about that, and I kind of like I kind of think
Aliens.
about it as like a star people sort of thing. If you think about the ancient
Yeah.
aliens, like um it seems as though they like these are civilizations that were advanced for their time and sort of just pinnacles of this like human understanding of their surroundings.
No, definitely. Like, so then it gets, you end up tying it to astronomy, right? Which, I mean, the Mayans were known for that calendar and basing everything off those stars, which becomes interesting. Like they have this saying, right, about so that agricultural thing comes out in their writings as well. I mean, we have likely Mayan hieroglyphics, but it's seeds are sown in the earth to dawn as plants. Celestial bodies are sown beneath the earth in their rising. Humans are sown in mothers' wombs to dawn into life. Bones of the dead are sown into the underworld to dawn as sparks of light in the darkness. So you get this pattern of birth, death, and rebirth, much like stars go and fade out and stuff like that. So I wonder if it's those stars that end up tying all these ancient civilizations together that were advanced.
Yeah, and them adopting a sort of like cyclical understanding of the nature of time. Yeah, because you'd be able to witness that, in representations over generations, even, being able to see stars come and go, and, seasons change and moons shift. And yeah,
Trees
definitely.
walk.
Trees walk.
Hmm.
Yeah.
and that bleeding of the trees. I do find the
Hmm.
blood sacrifice a little, uh, like from a modern sensibility, a little strange, but the idea I get where humans were indebted to the gods, and the only way to pay them back in any sort of reciprocity was through bloodletting. And then just the heavy ritualized notions that the Mayans had due to the cyclical nature of time.
Yeah. Yeah, and it also kind of touches on the psychology a little bit of like we like to work for the things that we aim for. And so there's a little bit of an understanding that there needs to be a sacrifice for the goal that you wish to achieve. That's why, like you have this notion of bloodletting rituals during significant events. Everything comes at a certain price, but it's also psychologically fulfilling for the human mind to go through work to get a reward and not just to have the reward in of itself.
Yeah, but that work express like, I wonder if instead of getting paid, they just skipped bloodletting.
Maybe, yeah, you don't have to chop off a finger today.
Well, but it wasn't like a lot of blood. I mean, are there specifics on if it was just a few drops or was it like a huge bloodletting?
They had so if you can pull up Pacal's sarcophagus, you see images of bloodletting bowls. So they were filling up some bowls, and as like when, if I remember correctly, when royal females bled themselves, the blood would run down cloth and drip into the bowl. So it has to be enough
Mhm.
blood to actually run down the cloth.
Okay, got it. So this actually makes more sense because I was having a lot of ideas in the beginning, and sorry listeners if I was all over the place. I was trying to pull from all these different places, but we have acupuncture here, and people use needles. They do cupping too and other herbal stuff, but um, there is a form of acupuncture that is specifically bloodletting. And the idea is that, let's say, you have a migraine, or you're prone to headaches or something like that. There's specific areas where they can drain blood. I think it's like, well, I'm not going to get in all that, but there are specific areas where even just one drop of blood can fix the migraine. And there's like weird reports and studies about that. Not weird, but just, you know, they're not going to be in Harvard Law Review, but they might be in like like a state college somewhere in like a back library, because there is evidence about it, but it's just a hard thing to regulate. And I mean, that's why it's not legal in America, but there are places in other countries where they do it. But anyway, that being said, there are other spots where you're like looking more at organs and they do bloodletting along like the torso. And I've heard reports that the blood can be all over the floor. And what's interesting about the observations of those experiences is that the blood starts out really dark. It's like stagnant, and then it starts to get brighter red and it slows down on its own, however they're doing it. And there's like different instruments and stuff. So I wonder if this is like another form of the Mayans understanding that maybe you get to 20, you've been working, you're really exhausted, your body needs a good bloodletting just to replenish itself. Like, for example, you can lose close to half your blood volume and then rebound, through transfusions, and then you slowly make your own blood. And then pregnant women, they gain like their entire body's worth of blood during the pregnancy process, which is kind of cool. Then it's like, where did all that blood go? Some of it's in the placenta, and that's nutrient rich. So anyway, that's kind of where my mind was pulling from when I was saying that like blood has all these properties that we're still like uncovering and discovering correlations around like body stuff. So for whatever
maybe
that's worth,
Makes
maybe we
sense.
just had a lot more demons in our blood back then.
maybe.
Hmm.
Well, I mean, there's a time when we used leeches as like a medical thing
Hmm.
to pull
Yep,
blood out of the body, to pull the demons out of the blood.
Yeah,
it's
gotta
very
get those
true.
demons out, man.
All right, man, it's rough. It's rough.
But
um,
like it can help too. Like let's say you have internal bleeding, and I don't know. I
No, we're
don't
not
know.
medical professionals, so
No, I
we
know.
don't.
I'm just
We
thinking
don't.
on like cases and movies and books that I've read. I'm like, where can I pull from? Because it's just interesting. I mean,
I
you
mean,
know.
there is some bloodletting in like wrestling, right? There's an old wrestling trick where you hide the razor in your hand and then you cut the top of your forehead a little bit.
Oh my
Uh,
God.
yeah, so like if The Rock was wrestling Stone Cold Steve Austin and one of them hit him with a steel chair before the wrestler would get up, you just cut the top of your forehead. And any cut from the forehead area is going to bleed a lot. So there's
Oh
like
yeah.
there is bloodletting. There's forms of bloodletting that's socially acceptable, but this in the Mayan religion and the Mayan culture, it was like a part of their daily life, or not daily life. It was part of their ritual. So, like, if you got a promotion, you would bloodlet. If you got married, you would bloodlet, and if you're royal, you would do it to try to get visions of the future. And
What? Oh, go ahead.
it,
Sorry.
no, it gets crazy. There's some even saying that during the downfall of the Mayan, culture, that they couldn't get like they didn't have the foresight because there was too many things happening for a small group of elite king priest types to foresee. So I wonder if like the amount of sacrifices and self bloodletting went through the roof, making them weaker and less able to govern.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, if you lose blood, you're gonna start hallucinating. You can have seizures, you can have heart attacks, you can have all kinds of issues. I mean, so like there comes a point where too much of something's gonna be a bad thing.
Well, and you gotta think about the idea of like you're cutting yourself in the middle of a rainforest with like 100% humidity and a whole bunch of bacteria and viruses everywhere. Over time, your odds of surviving those bloodlettings are gonna diminish.
Maybe that's why they were doing it. Maybe you build like a tolerance to that stuff. If you
Maybe.
bloodlet at 10% when you have your first kiss, and then 20% when you get married, and
A lot of
30%
blood.
your first permission. Yeah. But you're right about the head wound too, because like, I only had 3 stitches on my brow, but I promise you I filled up. Like I'm looking at the bowls that you mentioned. I could have easily filled up 2 of those bowls, if not 3. I looked like Carrie. It was horrendous.
The sacrifice.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I felt really great after that, come to think about it. Um,
A bit lighter. A bit lighter on
yeah.
the
Yeah.
um, I know, and I only want to talk about this bloodletting so much because it was tied into their gods so heavily in their notion of the agriculture and the sowing, and maybe because of the rainforest as well, there might have been some. Maybe I'm reaching a bit here, but some connection between it raining and it
Did
raining
we have an
blood.
interrupter?
Wait,
What?
what?
Sorry, did you hear that woof?
No.
No?
There's a little dog wolf.
Yeah, I thought Indy woofed on your side of the mic. I'm sorry.
Mm-mm.
Oh, some dragons. Them skeletal
Dragons.
dragons.
Right, right. Sorry, Mike.
No, you're good. But no, that sarcophagus lid ends up being kind of a cool dynamic of, or a cool image of Mesoamerican religions in general. Because you have Pakal falling to Zibalba, which is their underworld, um, while in motion, kind of like tying in some of the Aztec notions we talked about earlier, or in a couple episodes ago. And if there was a dialogue between the two tribes, it makes sense that they would want to capture this frame in motion. And you have these beautiful jade celestial type dragons in the sky, and you have skeletal dragons coming underneath or coming down at the bottom, which makes it the above and below type notion. And this king being in the middle of this, uh, being like the axis mundi, the living human tree. And then I believe along the sides of the sarcophagus are also just different portraits of the ancestors, which starts to tie in together that Mayan calendar and this notion of regeneration and keeping track of the long line of ancestors. Because it wasn't the end. Like their story about
sun and moon creation ends up being about these twins who travel to Zimbabwe, and through a series of cunning tricks and cunning tricks ends up defeating all the lords of death, ends up going by these trials. So in theory, what would happen is you would travel to the underworld and you would be given a set of challenges, impossible challenges, much like Hercules. And as you passed through each challenge, things would get more difficult, or it would be a different type of challenge. I'm trying to remember if I can read one or remember one off the top of my head without having to get into the text and reading. But basically, these brothers go through the underworld. They complete the series of challenges, and the lords of death are so impressed with their last feat, where one brother brings another brother back to life, that they ask the brothers to kill them and bring them back to life, like an ooh me next sort of thing. So they kill the lords of death, but don't bring them back to life. And when they return, one brother becomes the sun, and the other brother becomes the moon,
Mm.
which is a pretty cool story, without having to like dive into the full list of feats and trials. But it also
Yeah.
has like a Dante's Inferno type vibe.
Yeah, very much sort of a trickster god sort of motif as well. Kind of reminds me of like the origin story of Hermes or something like that, where he steals Apollo's lyre and also his sheep, and then makes Apollo bargain, to get him back, and that's how he gets the winged sandals from Apollo. But yeah, it's like the concept of just like transcending the older gods and becoming the new gods, and going through the underworld. That obviously the classic trope of descending into the darkness in order to come back a hero, and more than a human, right? It's that metamorphosis into something new entirely.
And all of these were like self-initiated things. So it was the self-transformation, the notion of self-knowledge that
Mm.
allowed them to trick these lords of death, as it said in the, as I'm looking in the book now, as it said. But I do like the trope that it's like, again, one of these ancient things that ties all of these different cultures and even our religion now together, right? We still
Hmm.
have this notion of hell and things like that. However, it's not a negative thing. It's closer to like it's just the underworld. It's just the
It's a
darkness.
necessity. Yeah,
Yeah,
necessity for transcendence. You can't have transcendence without the underworld. Without the obstacle to overcome. Obstacle is just as necessary as the destination.
yeah, no, it's true. And but it's you compare that to something like, our modern notion of Christianity, where if you just continually do good things, you'll get into heaven. Whereas I think in
Mm.
the Mayan religion, you that wouldn't happen. You have to travel through the underworld to come back to, I guess in this case, becoming celestial bodies. Right?
Hmm.
Uh, you go in as bones and you come out as light, which is brings in that imagery of that skeletal dragon from the sarcophagus. It gets really like pretty neat, pretty cool.
Yeah, very cool. And like this sort of human fascination with death and rebirth kind of makes me wonder if these civilizations were either privy or had knowledge of the the sort of life cycles of humans in a larger populous sense of like bottlenecks that we know at least 70,000 years ago happened. But like these near extinction level events that happen over the course of the earth's existence makes me wonder if perhaps these ancient people knew more about them than we may think they do, and kind of used those those religious stories in order to retell the information down the generations.
Yeah, I wonder too if it could have been latent. Like, well, I guess that would be the vehicle would be the religious story, right? But I
Mm.
wonder if it was forgotten at one point, but kind of like in the DNA of humans.
I could
'Cause
see
there's
that. Yeah.
because there's no way that these cultures, these civilizations come up in parallel and have no means of communicating with each other, but have the same foundational stories, right?
Mm.
It just seems far fetched that it would be a random series of events.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, maybe this is all just intrinsic to the human condition, and we all just, like for as scattered amongst the world that we all have the same sort of stories in our heart, and the same sort of things make us, feel warm and fuzzy inside. Like
True.
the things that we love, and the stories that we admire, seem to be universal amongst the human species.
Have Have you? This reminds me of a Twilight Zone episode called "People Are Alike Everywhere." Never seen it?
No, I don't think so.
So there's um, I guess like a crash landing on another planet, and one human dies, the other one goes out to explore reluctantly. And as the spaceship door opens, there's a bunch of humanoid type beings that are like, "Hey, welcome! We built this house for you. We've been watching your species, blah blah blah." So they invite them into the house, and he's like, "This is cool. This is amazing." Except in like a not like a futuristic 1950s house, but closer to like a typical 1950s house.
Hmm.
And he's like, "This is great." He's like, "All right." The humanoid's like, "All right, we'll leave you here. Enjoy. We'll talk to you tomorrow." And they leave, and he starts to walk around, and all of a sudden he notices like the doors don't open,
Hmm.
and they all of a sudden there's no windows or anything like that. And then the walls that were supposed to be the window open up to a series of bars. And there's a little sign, and all the humanoids are there looking around at him. And he walks over and he picks up the sign, and it says, "Earth, like Earth human in its natural habitat."
Yeah, yeah. He's in a zoo.
Yeah, well, but this is kind of the way we look at like ancient people, though, right? Like we look at
Mm.
them in this, oh, we're kind of higher up than them now. We're more advanced than them because we have all this technology. We can communicate through the airwaves. Like I'm on Wi-Fi.
Mhm.
I have nothing connecting like my computer to the wall or to the internet or anything. So
Mm.
if we brought an ancient person here, they would be like, "What is this magic?" Right? And we're just,
Of
oh,
course, yeah.
ancient. But it's still that notion of like we're all still sort of alike. We're still doing this weird thing. We just have slightly more sophisticated technology.
Well,
Yeah.
oh yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Ayla. I was just agreeing.
Oh yeah. Well, I was just going back to like the underworld discussion. Um, it's like it is in some ways their version is a bit more sophisticated because I always used to wonder, like, okay, entrance to heaven, you must be a good person. But it's easier to be a good person if you don't have any struggle. If you have a lot of struggle, there's a lot more opportunity to, like Aladdin steal a loaf of bread to feed, a starving kid or something like that. More of those opportunities. And so I think it's interesting that, like, regardless of your life and how it goes, everybody goes into the underworld and they have to experience that fight for themselves and climb out of it in order to get to the light.
So if we brought like an ancient Mayan here, we translated Dante's Inferno, you think they would laugh at us and be like, "What is this silliness? Where's the self transformation? Where's the magic in any of this?"
Well, yeah, because in that scenario, some people never experience it. And they would be like, that's weird. That's kind of weird. I mean, especially on a soul level, like you think that's kind of like the more pure existence, so that would be something that's tested equally, but it's more difficult in this plane.
Yeah, but I think that heaven and earth or heaven and hell are on this plane, right? I mean, like it's just, like
Well, it can be in your mind. I think there
yeah.
isn't there a great quote, the mind is a powerful thing and it can make a heaven of hell and a hell of heaven.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, that's yeah. I mean, that's kind of the way I always see the sort of religious metaphor is that like you have the ability, the kingdom of heaven is within each of us, and I think that there's there's a metaphor there that, like you have the ability to sort of go into the underworld within your own psyche and transcend that and find a place of perhaps enlightenment or some proximity to that. Yeah.
And it's true. I mean, because like the counter argument to what I just said would be, well, just because someone has a perceived, quote, easy life, end quote, there could be other stuff that they're dealing with that's not visible, but is very much at the same mathematical level of struggle everywhere. You know what I mean? Like relative to that person's makeup and stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, like it could go either way for sure. I think that's why we keep asking these questions. It would be great if the Mayans just knew this stuff and left us books and we were like, oh, yes, this is the way of it. And like done.
A lot of like that. They did have this book called the Book of Counsel.
There it is.
Yeah, and that's where I pulled the code open from. That's their mythic creation, but it's in their language, Popova. But I do find it interesting when we talked about the Council of Nine, that their book is also referred to as the Book of Counsel, which may imply some sort of contact with higher dimensional beings or
it's
aliens.
possible.
Uh-huh.
Not saying aliens, but aliens.
Aliens.
Did you hear about that Harvard scientist who was like, that's it, guys, I'm writing in a book. It's totally possible that there could be aliens out there. In fact, it's more possible. Like, and everyone made a big deal about it. And it's just like, well, yeah, I mean, universe is endless. There's got to be something else out there. Like, but oh no, his crazy claim, quote unquote, was that this thing that flew by Earth in like 2014 was actually evidence of alien technology. You guys hear about that?
The Oumuamua satellite. That was like 2 years ago.
Okay, well then I don't know. But no, he was probably talking about it 2 years ago. But his book is coming out. Like
okay, but the satellite came by, or the comet or whatever passed by in 2018, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know when it was. I just know that the alien thing passed it after 2010, but not last year. But they were talking about it last year because this book is coming out this year. So
I think he did a podcast on Joe Rogan. I think he did. Yeah,
that
talks
sounds like
about
a thing. No, that seems like a thing Joe Rogan would
cover. Totally. I mean, it's possible.
Pulling us back, like you get those. I guess you could see those like jade dragons as aliens, right? Like that.
Mm-hmm.
The celestial dragons of sort.
Yeah,
I can see that. Like those self-transforming. Just to kind of pull it back to the underworld, I guess, because all hell Hades. Like if there's a definite good vehicle to drive yourself through the underworld, do you think it would come more from the Mayan side or more of like our notion of Christian notion of hell, right? If hell is on this plane and heaven's on this plane and we're going through the underworld to get to heaven, I wonder if integrating those ideas together, right, along with more psychologically based ideas, I guess Jungian ideas, because I enjoy Jung a lot as far as just that shadow, right, and thinking of the shadow as the underworld. And for me, since I'm a guy, or I consider my anima to be at the end of that underworld, that is the transcendental thing that pulls you up towards heaven. Do you think like the Mayans would be closer to correct with this idea of being able to trick the lords of death and being thrown to the wolves, I guess, so to say, and having to learn it or figure it out for yourself? Or would something like Dante's Inferno be better, where you have a guide to kind of direct you through these different demons and things like that?
I see the merits in both, and I kind of see them as sort of similar as well. To me, it's like an illustration of the excellence in the mind. And I say excellence in a very abstract way because I don't know exactly what quality I am pinpointing at the moment, but it seems as though it's this sort of ability to use your mind in a way that removes obstacles from your path. So in Dante's Inferno, a lot of the, at least in the Inferno, a lot of what he is doing is going through the layers of hell and seeing people that he knew. And a lot of what you read is sort of his response to what he's seeing, you know, and the tortures that he's seeing of the people that he knew. And something kind of like something about that process making seems to be almost a vehicle in which he is able to keep climbing. At least that was my interpretation of it a little bit. But it's kind of runs parallel with that sort of like the ability to trick the gods, the ability to process and sort of transcend in the mind. I think is sort of in both of those examples.
Let's see that. Ayla?
I'm just listening. I don't really have a specific. Yeah, I'm just kind of trying. Yeah, yeah. It's interesting stuff.
It is. I do see them running in parallel in that descent, like because Virgil helps Dante, I guess, see those people and kind of get by those demons, right? But they're not necessarily gods, right?
No.
Whereas these Mayan in the Mayan underworld, they are lords of death in different ways, and thinking of like tricking the gods. I guess lords, you can consider them gods, right? If I can conflate that word lord a bit. That brings me kind of to like the Promethean idea too, and connecting that to the light bringer, Lucifer. There we go. Brings me to that notion where, like, you know, this Titan Prometheus stole the fire from the gods, tricked the gods, stole the fire, gave it to the humans, and there's a trial in Zimbabwe where, like, they're given a torch, like just like a non-lit torch, but they have to act like it's lit or like not lighted and like given a match and like get through this plane of complete darkness without lighting it. And along the way, they're able to find like these fireflies and kind of mock that it was lit. And that's the way they kind of trick and get around this idea of that you can't light your own fire. Like you find a substitute of sorts.
Yeah, I think that's really, you know, like the classic illustration of the human's conquest over their environment sort of thing. And I think that's the quality that I sort of recognize in a lot of these sort of descent into the underworld tales, where it's like you have to use your cunning and your intelligence in order to defeat the surroundings and even the gods themselves. I mean, you know, nature was the first god, at least to our knowledge. So, you know, like there's definitely something there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just that, like, is it too to be a bit of a trickster just a human quality?
Yeah, I would think so. And so is rebellion, you know? Like we love our rebellion. We love to say no to authority. I mean, that's in almost every sort of tale of origin or mythology. There's a constant, you know, humans rebelling against the gods.
And then that sacrifice sort of thing. Because I just jumped to Star Wars, and like a lot of Bothan spies had to die for this.
Yeah, that's right.
But the Empire is like the gods, and you know, this ragtag rebellion force tricking their way and kind of like,
oh yeah,
you know, getting. I wonder if there's some like thing you could do with like Episode 4 and relating it to tricking gods.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I think there's probably people who have done essays on how it, you know, follows the hero's journey and all of that, you know, like Jungian archetype and stuff like that.
I wonder if that's part of just like humans' evolution, though, because like, you know, if you think about a civilization that's really like homogeneous, there's not going to be a lot of change going on in that. Like you need like a scrappy ragtag rebellion to point out like, hey, this isn't working, or this is, you know,
Yeah.
doing harm or whatever. And then things shift, and then opens up a new civilization that starts to get kind of stagnated and comfortable and complacent, and then something else will pop up. And so I think, like, that could be part of why we like underdogs and why a lot of our mythology is around, challenges that we use our cunning or our community to like fight back against.
Yeah. And defiance too. And I think it's a little bit of defiance of
And defiance. You're right. No, there
yeah.
is that spirit that's like, no.
Yeah. And I think it kind of like is an illustration of our defiance of fatalism, right? And our desire to exalt free will. It's like it's the human spirit to say, no, I don't care. The gods say that I'm doomed to do X, Y, and Z. I'm not going to do that, or I am going to do this, or like it's taking charge of your life.
Yeah.
And not allowing yourself to just be a sort of like a, like a, I don't know,
Dragged
leaf in the
along
wind.
like a can.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I was gonna say like a can on one of those wedding cars. Clacking together and being dragged. Which is
Do
poor
people still
cans.
do that?
I don't think you can. That's like kind of a road hazard. You'd cause
Yeah.
somebody like a definitely a flat tire.
Mhm.
But I'm
So
interested,
that sounds
Mike.
like we should do it then.
Yeah, totally. I'm curious, Mike, remind me of the young perspective to all of this. I think that's kind of an interesting thing to go back to, having talked a little bit more about like underworld and like humanity's need to overcome,
What I do like is what our previous conversation though, like that at the macro level works as like a Mayan ritual, right? You have the birth of the system. The system grows as old as it can and gets comfortable. Then it dies, and then it gets reborn again. May it, hopefully something better, but just that ritualistic nature of like a wheel spinning. I do like that. And then
Mhm.
on the individualistic level, I guess that would be the above, and then the below with this Jungian stuff, you kind of have your ego as like the light, like the before the hero's journey sort of thing. So like whoever you are, and as you descend into yourself, into your shadow, the things that are hidden, the qualities that you don't want to admit, the things that you do when you're alone, but you don't want anybody else to know about, I guess could be one way to put it. But it might be better to say like just your negative qualities, your more dangerous qualities, less polite, more crass, at least in the viewpoint of our society. You can say like those are light things, but just that dark side of yourself. And so going into the underworld of who you are, like for me, it was dealing with a bunch of repressed memories, right? Like my underworld had to deal with, was closely related to my childhood. So diving into those memories and like the the I don't want to use the word traumatizing because I feel like that may be overused, but the more horrific side of that stuff, the things that I didn't want to remember, dealing with those ordeals in my own way through like this vehicle of self-transformation and picking up philosophy, picking up psychology, learning about Jungian things and the archetype, and then coming out of that and having a different perspective on the whole experience while also learning more about my memories, like regaining all that stuff. That to me is like the Jungian sort of thing of descending or putting yourself into that underworld, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
that
can
makes
you
sense.
can you can do like the Jordan Peterson thing of going to the belly of the beast to save your father. For me, it was more saving my mother, which is why I kind of hold it in a Jungian archetype where it's the anima that I was traveling towards. And we'll do an episode on the anima. I've actually been slowly trying to weave in all this mythology to get to Jung, but
Nice.
yeah, on a Monday episode for sure.
Yeah.
And I should do my due diligence on all that research. But yeah, no, for me, that's what that Jungian thing was like. So it happens on the individualistic level, right? And maybe my underworld may not be the same as somebody else's underworld, but I
That's
do think,
guaranteed not to be. Yeah.
hopefully, right? Otherwise, the simulation is broken and everybody has the same
Yeah.
childhood, which would suck.
Right.
But that that like at least giving people the tools, like the cunning, like the tricks to be able to deal with that sort of stuff. Whatever.
Mhm.
I mean, I guess if I just put it in the past, like whatever your past was, things that you don't want to talk about or what have you, um,
Yeah. Well, and there's
it
something
becomes.
too. Oh, sorry. Yeah, becomes.
No, no, go for it. I was just gonna
Oh,
say it becomes important to understand that underworld journey and not reject it.
yeah. No, I definitely agree. And I was just going to add to just sort of amplify this sort of underworld journey. What seems to happen a lot too is that the hero in question usually has to lose a substantial amount before the journey, and it that seems to be almost the catalyst. It's the push out the door, right? So to use another classic trope, it's the thing that forces the hero down into the depths. Most of the time, it's a reluctant journey, which is interesting because sort of that would sort of hint at the universality of this sort of myth that it can fit anybody, even those who aren't brave enough to perhaps take the steps, but are thrust into the position and find their bravery in the depths. So I think that there's something important about the loss that happens before the journey.
Yeah.
You think about like in Star Wars terms, right? So Luke has to lose his aunt and uncle before he sets out.
Yeah.
Stuff like
There's,
that.
there's definitely like losing my uncle might have been part of the catalyst for me because I'm also
Mm,
thinking about our like middle path episode too, where like you are you cast yourself into the fire, but you're right, like on the reluctant journey,
mm,
it's not you that are throwing yourself off of this mountain. It's you're Virgil or something throwing you
mm-hmm.
off into this
Right.
mountain, into that fire and into that underworld, so you can begin this self transformation.
Mm-hmm. Like the Phoenix reborn.
Yeah, we get even more like widespread myth now, right? But for some reason, all one single abstracted story.
Yeah, in thousands of different iterations. It's really beautiful. It's very inspiring.
Looks beautiful, man.
Yeah.
It's a Clerks reference. Good old Scott
Here,
Mosier.
here.
Yeah. Let's see. Anything else? Anything else that we want to talk about? Any questions? As I'm like just scrolling through the notes real quick.
Um, so what role do you think the serpent plays in the sort of Mayan mythology? Is it an adversarial role like you see in the Western tradition, or is it more of like a teacher role?
Mm. Um, it's closer to like the Quetzalcoatl type thing. So they were big
Mm,
on like zootropic. Like the king would wear different headdresses and different knee pads that represent different animals based on different uh, rituals. So I guess
mm-hmm,
it's more like the teacher sort of thing,
mm-hmm,
but could be adversarial. I mean, the cult of the Mayan dragon um, allowed the Mayans to trade with the Aztecs.
mm-hmm.
Right, so it's definitely not an adversary, and the downfall of the Aztecs comes from kind of liking this serpent, this feathered serpent, a bit too much. Because within their prophecy, they talked about second coming of this dragon as a blonde-haired person, and that ended up being
Yeah,
the Spanish, and then
right.
invited them right into Tenochtitlan, and they're like, "Oh, look at
Whoops.
all this gold! This is pretty cool." Yeah,
Yeah.
that was a
Jeez.
mistake.
That was a big
This
mistake. Goodness.
but it was definitely like a teacher role,
Mm,
less so than a adversary. But you have the below aspect, which is the dragon of skeletons.
mm-hmm.
So I'm sure that dragon skeleton may take more of like the Western notion of the serpent.
Sort of also the illustration of like the yin yang too, where it's like you have the
Yes.
celestial dragon and then the subterranean dragon, which represents the sort of light and dark. Yeah, I
Yeah.
like that. Very cool.
Yeah.
Très cool. Ayla, you got anything?
Nah, très cool.
Cool. Well, that's all I got. Unless we want to start talking about like actual like Mayan days and counting out their number system, but that might be a little too nerdy.
Oh, that might get into like a gematria episode.
Ooh.
That would be pretty cool. The significance of numbers and the symbolism behind numbers, that would be pretty sweet.
Yeah, that would be cool. We might want to save that for then.
Yeah, definitely. We can do that in the future for sure. Well, thanks, Mike. That was fun. Sorry that we had so many issues to start with, but hey, we took like a day off, and now we're all like confusticated. So we'll get back into our
Seriously.
groove.
My mother was texting me like during
Oh,
the first
geez.
half, and yeah, it was just very distracting. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
All
No,
over the place.
it was a fascinating episode. I really love learning about, different cultures, mythologies, and origins, and their sort of take on it. Because like we've said in this episode, like there's just so much similarity, and it speaks to something deep within us that I think is, again, very beautiful. So yeah, thanks, Mike. This was a great convo.
Awesome. And with our cunning and our tricking, we tricked the technological gods. And
That's right. Yeah, we made it through. We had to descend into the underworld to get those bugs out, but we did it.
I love it. I love
Yeah.
it.
Well, thank you so much, you guys, for listening. We really hope that you enjoyed this episode. I know I did. And if you have any questions or any comments, please let us know. Feel free. Other than that, thank you so much for listening. We very much appreciate you. Until Monday, we will be back at 8 p.m. You stay out there, Cognonauts, and we'll catch you on the next Exofathom. Good night.
Peace.
Later.